Alright, today I wanted to talk about a video game that people don't really talk about too much anymore. Now, I do feel like it would be a little unfair for me to say it's underrated because it did gather a lot of attention when it initially released. I'm talking about tens of millions of views. But since now that it's been about 8 years since its release, people don't really talk about it that much anymore. Of course, as y'all can see from the title, I am talking about the video game Overgrowth. Now, for me personally, Overgrowth was one of those video games that I always really loved, but I could never really understand why. As some of y'all know, I didn't get my PC till late 2021. So that was my first opportunity to play Overgrowth, and I instantly fell in love with it. Look, before we dive a little deeper into what Overgrowth is, some of my lighter viewers may wonder what's on my head. This is a lock cap, and I have this on because my locks are wet. If you desire to see what my hair looks like, you can see it in literally almost every other video I have on my channel. Anyway, I digress. The thing about Overgrowth is, it's like one of those video games that looks simple when you first look at it, but the deeper you get into it, the more you realize it's really complex. Now, not because of the story or anything like that, because honestly, I've played through it probably at least 30 to 40 times by now, and I still cannot tell you what the story is about. That's not because the developers did a bad job of portraying the story. It's more because I just never cared about it. I was solely there for the action. Now, that might be a good or bad thing, but I don't really know how to feel about that. Overgrowth is actually an indie game that was developed by Wolfire Games. If you aren't familiar with this game studio, they are the same developers that made Lugaru. And actually, this game was meant to be a sequel to Lugaru, which to a certain extent it still is, but I think anybody who's played it can attest that it is way more than that. Development of Overgrowth began in around 2008, and the game actually wasn't released till 2017. Now, all these studios are competing on how long it takes for a game to come out, Rockstar likely being in the lead. But unlike Rockstar, Wolfire actually had a good reason for why it took the game so long to come out. It wasn't because of like development issues or team conflicts or anything like that. It was because they were truly trying to experiment with the game and trying to change how combat and physics were looked at in games. I think the biggest thing that made Overgrowth special was the procedural animation system. Most games rely on pre-made animations, meaning that every punch, kick, jump, etc. is planned ahead of time. And pretty much no matter what happens, that whole animation is going to play out. This was very apparent in Overgrowth because if you jump, kick, do a punch, and something weird happens in the middle of it, your character will get thrown off balance or you will just fall in a very awkward way, which in my opinion was super cool. Now, one of my favorite aspects of video games is the physics, or maybe just the easiest way to impress me. So when I discovered a game that innovated so heavily on physics, I was immediately hooked. It really makes it feel like every combat scenario is unique. That's why I could play the same levels over and over again without ever getting tired of them. This innovation on physics was also implemented into the parkour system in the game. And yes, if you have not played it, you can do everything: run, wall jump, backflips. All of it is possible. In my opinion, honestly, I feel like this made it harder to control. I wasn't a big fan of the parkour because I do feel like you walk a very thin line there between fun and just way too realistic. Yes, in real life, I could jump and just hit a tree branch or something and fall to the ground, but I don't know if I really want to go through that in the game. Or like I'm jumping and I don't angle this exactly right and I'm not going to grab the ledge. I don't find that very entertaining. Another aspect of the game that I like was Overgrowth's like blood and damage system. Now, I don't know if this makes me weird. You know, now that I think about it, why would I care if y'all think I'm weird or not? Of course I'm weird. I'm sitting here talking to myself at 2 in the morning about a video game that I love. Can you subscribe though? That would make me feel a little bit better about me being weird. Anyway, like I was saying, I really love the blood and damage aspect of the game. In the game, if you attack somebody with a knife, depending on where you hit them, it would make a cut and they would bleed from that exact point. And if you were to happen to slit a rabbit's throat, blood would spread out their neck while they scramble on the ground, bleeding out. Now, I don't know if it makes me a psychopath to be in love with the death animations of a video game, but it definitely does make the combat feel a lot more brutal. I'm a person who likes to feel the brutality of the game. I want to feel like I put the knife in your throat and twisted it slowly.
FBI? Him. Come on in. There he is.
Too much? Yeah, probably so. Sorry. But that was another small attention to detail that I appreciated very much. Another interesting part about this whole development of this game was how open they were about it. Like I said earlier, Overgrowth was primarily made as an experiment. They constantly uploaded devlogs, gameplay footage, and behind the scenes look of what worked and what didn't. A lot of mechanics were added, removed, and reworked multiple times. And even entire systems were scrapped if they just didn't feel right. Now they should have let that parkour sit in the oven a little bit longer, but I mean, they had 9 years. I don't know what was going on. I'm sorry if anybody feels a way about my opinion about the parkour, but I'm sorry I can't fake it. I'm just not a fan. I do think this kind of transparency helped build a loyal fan base, but it also probably put the team under a lot of pressure because they knew they had to deliver on the fans' expectations. To be fair, if you do sell a game as innovative and say it's going to change the entire industry, I think people will kind of start to expect that. I think an impressive aspect of it was that it was largely self-funded. Now, like I said, this was an indie game, so that aspect of it isn't really that surprising, but I think the most surprising aspect was that they were able to build something like this from that type of funding. There's a lot of bigger teams with a lot bigger budgets that make far less impressive games, but there's the EA. Did y'all hear something? Must have been a win. When the game did release, the reactions were actually kind of mixed. Some players loved it, they loved the physics-based things, while some people actually hated it. A lot of people felt like it was too difficult or that it felt unfinished. I do understand these criticisms because the story is really short. You can actually finish it in probably under 3 hours, but I do feel like regardless of how you feel about the final product, you do have to give it the respect of seeing that it did something that no other game did up to that point. I think at Overgrowth's core, it's more than just a game. It's more of an experiment and a message to the industry of what developers could do if they are willing to take risks. I know it might not have stood the test of time as well as some other games, but a lot of modern games that come out today still are not up to par in terms of the physics system that Overgrowth created. The people who got it really did get it. And that's why it still has a very small but very much alive fan base till this day. That's pretty much all I got to say about Overgrowth. I just wanted to shed some light on it because it is a game that I truly enjoy. I do recommend you playing it. I think it's only like $20 on Steam, so I think it's definitely worth a shot. Especially if you're out of school, give it a shot. You ain't got nothing else going on. Unless you work, that is, and then maybe you do have something else going on. Anyway, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Comment your opinions on Overgrowth and if it captures you the same way it did me. And look, one more thing before you go.
Bye.